I triple-checked, I said, placing the USB drive on the glass table. You're crazy, my stepmother smiled, her nails tapping a rhythm. Don't bring your filth into this company. I opened the photos. Her in the hotel elevator with the CEO. She lunged, striking me across the face. The salt of blood hit my lip, and the ceiling camera recorded everything. I, Rowan Hale, 29 years old, stood in the silence of the 46th floor. The meeting room was called the Catalyst. It was an absurdly ironic name for a 10 by 10 box of tempered glass and brushed steel. Suspended over the steel-gray sprawl of Grayford, through the walls, I could see the entire sprawl of the open-plan office, and they could see me. We were a diorama of corporate function. The air was recycled, chilled to a precise 68 degrees, and smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and the faint, ozone tang of overworked servers. My presentation was over. The 80-inch monitor at the end of the table was still glowing with my final slide, but the numbers on it were not the ones they were expecting. I was the lead of product analysis, and I was supposed to be talking about Q3 projections and market synergy. I had been, for 10 minutes. But the data didn't lie, and I was tired of lying for it. The last slide showed a chart of anomalous trade volumes, a series of statistically improbable short sells that had occurred 72 hours before our last earnings dip. Insider trading, not just anomalous, criminal. The silence in the Catalyst was absolute. It was the silence of men worth a combined 9 figures realizing their liability. Then, the click. My stepmother, Sloane Hale, placed her platinum fountain pen perfectly parallel to her leather-bound notebook. She was the interim CFO, a title she'd held ever since my father's unfortunate stroke 6 months after he married her. She didn't look at me. She smiled at the other board members, a tight, reassuring smile that was part of her asset portfolio. Her blonde hair was pulled into a chignon so tight it seemed to pull the skin at her temples. She wore a cream-colored bespoke suit that I knew, intimately, had been paid for by the funds reallocated from my mother's estate. "Rowan, darling," she said, her voice a smooth, cool balm designed to soothe investors. "I think we're getting a little heightened." She finally turned her eyes to me. They were Arctic blue and utterly devoid of warmth. "The stress of the quarter has been immense, for all of us. I think perhaps you need to take a step back. Stabilize your mental state." She picked up the remote for the monitor. The screen went black. My evidence, my meticulously crafted data points, vanished. She had just erased me. "As I was saying before this, interruption," Sloane continued, turning back to the table. "Our projections for Q4 are robust." "I have more," I said. My voice sounded strange, loud in the small room. My hand was shaking, but I didn't let it show. I reached into the pocket of my blazer. Sloane's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed. "Rowan, that's enough. We've all indulged your passion project. Now, let the adults talk." The condescension was a physical thing, a heavy blanket designed to smother me, to make me small, to make me the unstable daughter she'd been painting me as for 2 years. The HR file she was building, full of anxiety and emotional volatility, was her masterpiece. I didn't look at her. I looked at my laptop, my personal laptop, which I had insisted on using. I pulled the small black USB drive from my pocket. "You're right," I said. "The data needs context." I slotted the drive into the USB port. The click of the connection was as loud as a gunshot in the vacuum of the room. Sloane's head snapped back. "What are you doing? I said you were finished." "I am." The monitor flickered back to life, not with my presentation, but with a simple file directory, a folder labeled Halberd. I clicked it. The first image filled the screen. It wasn't a graph. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a high-resolution photo from a hotel security camera. The lobby of the Halberd Hotel. The timestamp in the corner read 22:04 3 nights ago, the same night the short sells were executed from an offshore account. In the photo, Sloan Hale was standing far too close to CEO Victor Lane. "Turn it off," Victor commanded, his voice a low growl. He'd been studying his fingernails, feigning boredom. He was no longer bored. I clicked again. The elevator interior, 2205. Victor's hand was on the small of Sloane's back. "Rowan, I am warning you," Sloane hissed. I clicked again. The 42nd floor hallway, the presidential suite, 2207. Victor swiping a keycard. I clicked a final time. The embrace, just inside the doorway of suite 4207, before the door swung shut. It wasn't just an affair, it was a conspiracy. The CFO and the CEO, liquidating company assets into their own pockets via manufactured stock dips, and sealing the deal in a hotel room. The room inhaled, a collective, sharp gasp of recycled air. The other board members stared, faces pale, finally understanding what my anomalous trade slide had truly meant. Sloane moved. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She reacted like a cornered animal. She lunged, not around the table, but across it. Her perfectly tailored cream suit bunched at her shoulders as she stretched, her hand clawing for my laptop, for the USB drive. "You insane little—" I flinched back, pulling the laptop with me, her hand, aiming for the drive, missed. Her arm swung wide. And then, the sound. A dry, sharp clack. It wasn't the sound of a palm hitting skin. It was the sound of metal hitting bone. Her heavy gold bracelet, a gift from my father, struck my cheekbone with the force of her lunge. White-hot pain exploded under my eye. My head snapped to the side from the impact. My eyes watered instantly. A reflexive, humiliating betrayal. The room tilted. I tasted the sharp, coppery salt of blood as my lips split against my own tooth. For a second, there was no sound at all, just the low hum of the HVAC and the ringing in my right ear. Sloane froze, half bent over the table. Her eyes were wide, her mask of corporate perfection shattered. She saw the blood on my lip. She saw the stunned, horrified faces of the board. She straightened up. Slowly, she smoothed the front of her jacket. Her hand was shaking. She didn't get the drive. She took a step back from the table and leaned in close to me. The other board members were silent, paralyzed. Sloane's expensive perfume, gardenia and something suffocating, something like entitlement, washed over me. She whispered, so low only I could hear it. The words were a scalpel. "Who will believe you?" Her voice was a venomous hiss. "You're unstable. Everyone knows it. You just assaulted your CFO." She was already spinning. I wasn't the victim. I was the perpetrator, the crazy daughter. She turned and pressed the silver button on the wall. The heavy glass door of the catalyst hissed open. She stepped out into the open-plan office. Victor Lane scrambling out behind her, his face a mask of gray panic. "Security," Sloane said, her voice now loud, projecting, performing for the entire 46th floor. "Security to the catalyst room. Ms. Hale is unwell. She's become violent." I watched through the glass. The guard at the elevator bank, Marco, looked up. He'd seen me every day for 4 years. He'd smiled at me this morning. He looked directly at me. He saw the blood dripping onto my chin. He saw the red, swelling mark on my cheek. Then, deliberately, he looked away. He touched his earpiece, as if listening to a call, and turned his body slightly, presenting his shoulder to the scene. He was paid by Luminex. He was paid by her. The glass door slid shut with a heavy pneumatic thud. I was alone. The other board members, 2 men in their 60s, 1 woman in her 50s, were suddenly fascinated by the grain of the oak veneer table. They wouldn't meet my eye. They were calculating their own exposure, their own plausible deniability. My cheek was on fire. The humiliation was a cold stone in my stomach. She had won. She had hit me, in front of witnesses, and was successfully painting me as the attacker. My gaze drifted up, the ceiling corner, the black security dome. Beside it, a small laminated sign taped to the wall. Systems under maintenance. Apologies for the inconvenience. Sloane had been so thorough. She'd planned to gaslight me, to provoke me, and she'd made sure there would be no official record. I stared at the dark, impassive lens. Please, I thought, please, someone. And then I saw it. A pinprick of light, a single, tiny, almost invisible red dot. It blinked once, a silent confirmation. Then, it went dark. My breath hitched. It wasn't under maintenance, or if it was, someone had just bypassed it. Someone had the footage. My hand was shaking as I reached for my phone, which I'd left on the table. The screen was dark. As my fingers brushed the glass, it vibrated. A new message. The number was blocked. Don't give up. Parking garage. HR. My heart hammered against my ribs. HR. Not human resources. They were already compromised. They held my file. HR. Harlan Ridge, my grandfather, the man who had built Luminex Capital from nothing, and whom Sloane and Victor had forced into retirement 2 years ago, citing cognitive decline. I fumbled for the USB drive, my fingers slick with cold sweat. I pulled it from the port. I stood up. The chair scraped, a harsh, ugly sound against the floor. I touched my cheek, then my lip. My fingers came away red. I turned to leave, and my hand brushed the glass wall. I left a smear. I stopped and looked at it, a thin diagonal streak of my own blood on the perfect, cold glass. It looked like a signature, a contract, signed. I pushed the door open. The entire office was staring at me, whispering. I ignored them. I pocketed the USB drive, kept my head high, and walked toward the elevator, the taste of blood and adrenaline burning in my throat. The meeting wasn't over. It had just begun. The elevator hummed its silent descent from the 46th floor. It was a high-speed executive lift, all smoked glass and brushed steel, designed to insulate its occupants from the realities of the floors below. I leaned my head against the cool metal, the thrum of the cables vibrating through my skull. The blood on my lip had begun to dry, a tight, metallic crust. My cheek throbbed with a deep, percussive ache, a drumbeat for the adrenaline coursing through me. Parking garage. Sloane Hale had been my stepmother for 2 years, 6 months, and 4 days. She had entered our lives like a whisper, all muted neutrals and the faint, antiseptic smell of an expensive clinic. My mother had been gone for barely a year. My father, Grant, a man who had built a respectable import-export business on his own, was hollowed out by grief, a perfect vessel for a woman like Sloane to fill. She was an investment advisor, she'd said, meeting him at a charity gala. She'd advised him to consolidate his assets. She'd advised him to update his will. She'd advised him to marry her. 6 months after the wedding, my father had a stroke, a massive, debilitating one. The doctors were vague. A complex ischemic event. He was left alive, but not present. He sat in a state-of-the-art wheelchair in the sunroom of our family home, staring at a garden he no longer recognized, while Sloane managed his proxies. His shares in Luminex Capital, the company my grandfather had founded, it all went to her. She was granted temporary financial control, which seamlessly transitioned into her role as interim CFO. The elevator chimed, the doors sliding open to the main lobby. The cavernous space was all marble and black granite, designed to awe and intimidate. The midday chatter of employees and couriers died as I stepped out. I saw the head of corporate communications stop mid-sentence. I saw 2 junior analysts from my own department stare, then quickly look away, their faces flushing. They weren't looking at me. Rowan Hale, lead analyst. They were looking at the purple-black bloom on my cheekbone and the dried blood on my chin. I didn't flinch. I kept my gaze fixed on the revolving doors, my heels clicking a steady, defiant rhythm on the polished floor. Perception, as Sloane always said, is profit. The Hale family became her greatest product. We were Hale strong. We were the cover story of the Grayford Business Journal. The headline, Tragedy, Resilience, And the future of Luminex, CFO Sloan Hale steers the ship. The photo was a masterpiece of corporate propaganda. Sloan, in a sharp, empathetic navy suit, her hand resting gently on my father's shoulder. My father, groomed and dressed, but with a vacant politeness in his eyes, and me, Rowan, 27 at the time, summoned from my desk and told to look supportive. I smiled. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Behind the scenes, the reallocation began. Budgets were tightened, except for the ones that benefited Sloan. My mother's art collection was liquidated to ease cash flow. The charitable trust my mother had endowed was refocused on causes that happened to have Sloan on their advisory boards. I never wanted to work at Luminex. I had a data science degree from Stanford. I wanted to build something, but after my father's stroke, I knew I couldn't leave the company to her. I applied under my mother's maiden name. I went through 5 rounds of interviews. I won a quantitative analysis competition to secure my spot. I earned my job. I remember the day I was promoted to team lead. I'd presented my findings on market volatility segmentation. I found Sloan in the executive lounge. I got the promotion, I told her. She'd looked up from her tablet, a small, patronizing smile playing on her lips. "Oh, darling, that's wonderful. I heard they were impressed. You were the lucky alternate, weren't you? The first-choice candidate went to a competitor. Still, good for you. It's so important to have a hobby." She had to make it a gift, a lucky break. She couldn't stand the thought of me being there on my own merits, because if I was smart enough to get the job, I was smart enough to see what she was doing. She didn't just undermine me at work. She began to build a cage. It started 6 months ago, a friendly chat with an HR representative. "Rowan, a few people have expressed concern. They say you seem stressed, volatile." I was stressed. I was working 80-hour weeks. "I'm just focused," I'd said. "Of course," the HR rep said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "But Sloan mentioned your family history, the anxiety. We just want to make sure you have the support you need." My file. The file she was building. Rowan has a history of anxiety. Rowan is prone to emotional outbursts. Rowan needs supervision. It was a preemptive strike. She was discrediting her only potential witness before I even had a chance to speak. I pushed through the revolving glass doors. The cold Grayford air hit my face like a slap, a grim echo of Sloan's. The city was damp, the sky a bruised, colorless gray. I pulled my collar tight and walked toward the yawning concrete entrance of the underground garage. Sloan was never working alone. She was too smart to get her own hands dirty. She needed a partner, a protector. She found one in Victor Lane. The CEO of Luminex. He was her mentor, she'd claimed. He was guiding her. I'd watch them, the late-night meetings, the closed-door strategy sessions. His hand, always on the small of her back. The work that required hotel conference rooms. The work I just displayed on the 80-inch screen. I knew they were stealing. I just couldn't prove how. The proof came on a Tuesday night. 3 months ago, I was in my office at 2 a.m., running a regression analysis on our vendor contracts, trying to find why our operating costs were ballooning, and I found it. Silver Wren LLC. It was a ghost, a consulting firm with no website, no employees, no physical address, just a P.O. box in a state with lax incorporation laws, and it was receiving payments, huge, round number payments, $250,000, $500,000, all for executive strategic consulting, all approved with the digital signature of Sloan Hale. I traced the incorporation papers. The money was being funneled. It was a shell. It was the slush fund for their affair, for the stock manipulation, for the systematic bleeding of my family's company. This was the moment I learned to be silent. I couldn't just walk into the boardroom and accuse the CEO and CFO of fraud, not when my unstable HR file was 2 inches thick. Sloan's favorite phrase echoed in my head, from a town hall where she'd charmed the entire sales division. Perception is profit. People, it doesn't matter what the truth is, it matters what the market believes. She had controlled the narrative, so I had to control the data. I stopped talking about my concerns. I became the perfect, quiet, diligent analyst. I smiled in meetings. I nodded when Sloane condescended to me. And every night, I collected the data. I cross-referenced the Silver Wren payments with Victor's travel schedule. I pulled the keycard logs for the executive elevator. I got the car service receipts from a sympathetic clerk in accounts payable. I built my case, bit by bit, in the encrypted partitions of a drive no one knew I had. The drive now pressed against my hip, safe in my pocket. My greatest ally in this was the man they had already destroyed, Harlan Ridge, my grandfather, the man who had started Luminex with a single desk and a telephone. 2 years ago, Sloane and Victor had convened a special board meeting. They'd pushed him out. "With all due respect, Harlan," Victor had said, his voice dripping with false compassion, "your health is our primary concern." "Cognitive decline," Sloane had whispered, loud enough for the board minutes. "It's for his own legacy, to protect what he built." My grandfather had just stared at them. He was 78, but his mind was a steel trap. He'd stood up, leaning on his walnut cane. "The foundation is rotting," he'd said, his voice quiet, clear. "You're just painting the cracks. You'll find they don't hold." He hadn't spoken to me about the company since, not until a month ago. I'd gone to his house, desperate, my Silver Wren evidence burning a hole in my bag. I started to talk, to show him. He'd raised a hand. "Rowan?" He looked at me, his eyes sharp and clear. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs a microphone, at the right time. I reached the garage entrance. The air grew colder, heavy with the smell of concrete and unburned gasoline. I walked down the ramp to level B2, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The text message wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. It was the signal. "Don't give up." I wasn't giving up. I was just reloading. The photos were just the bait. The slap was the confirmation. The perfect family was a lie, and I was about to provide the audit. The microphone was waiting. The elevator doors slid shut, encasing me in the same brushed steel box Sloane had used to corner me last night. My cheek was a constellation of pain, the skin tight and hot. The USB drive I'd pulled from the laptop was a heavy, dense square of plastic in my fist. I leaned against the wall, my reflection a distorted mask in the polished metal. This whole thing, the meeting, the photos, the slap, it wasn't my attack. It was her countermove, and I had walked right into it. The plan had been so clean, so simple. It started 3 days ago, with an email from a burner account. "You're looking in the wrong place. Check the Halberd Hotel, room 4207. I'd paid the night manager at the Halberd. He was a disgruntled hospitality student buried in debt, for $500. He gave me 20 minutes with the previous week's security logs. I sat in a cramped back office that smelled of stale coffee and industrial bleach, my heart hammering as I spooled through the footage. And there they were. Timestamp, 2213. Sloane Hale. My stepmother, Victor Lane, my CEO. They weren't just mentoring, they were entangled. Stepping out of the 42nd floor elevator, Victor's arm was low on her back, his fingers spread possessively. Her head was tilted toward his. Her corporate mask dissolved into something else, something hungry. I recorded it all on my phone. The digital photos were sharp, undeniable. I went back to my terminal at Luminex. My credentials as team lead gave me access to the keycard logs. I ran a query on Sloane's executive ID, 2152. Exit, 46th floor, 2153. Exit, main lobby, 2154. Exit, parking garage. B1, she had left the building, officially, but the Halberd was only 2 blocks away. The timestamps were a perfect, damning match. The affair was the leverage. The Silver Wren LLC payments were the crime. The photos linked the two. I thought I was the hunter. I thought I was setting the trap. I sent the email to Sloane an hour later. Subject: urgent. Potential misinformation. The body was polite, professional, and dripping with plausible deniability. Sloane, some disquieting images have come to my attention that appear to involve you and Victor. I am sure there is a simple explanation. To avoid any damaging rumors, I'd like to review them with you privately before they are escalated. I've booked the Catalyst room for 9 a.m. tomorrow. I'd offered her a way out, a chance to explain. In reality, I was testing her. I was rattling the cage to see what the animal would do. She didn't just rattle the cage, she set it on fire. Her reply was instant. 9 a.m. is perfect. I'll add Victor and the board. It's best to be transparent about these concerns. She wasn't scared. She was eager. That was my first mistake. This morning, I'd walked into the Catalyst room. The laminated Systems Under Maintenance sign on the camera dome was the first red flag. The second was the email I'd seen on the HR manager's screen as I passed her desk. Re 9 a.m. Catalyst meeting. Mental health query. R. Hale. She wasn't preparing a defense. She was preparing an ambush. She was staging an intervention. She would paint me as the jealous, obsessed, unstable daughter, lashing out at the new, successful woman in her father's life. The story she'd been seeding for months. Rowan is inventing things. She's jealous of female advancement. She had turned my evidence into a symptom of my illness. I knew all this. I knew she was waiting for me to crack, but I still wasn't prepared. I had the truth, the photos, the data. I thought that would be enough. Then last night, everything changed. I'd been working late, finalizing the Silver Wren data. I got into the executive elevator alone. The car stopped on the 45th floor. The doors opened. Sloane stepped in. We were alone. The air crackled. She didn't look at me. She just stared at the closing doors. You should have stayed in your little sandbox. Rowan, she said, her voice low. The numbers don't lie. Sloane. Numbers can be erased. People, too. The elevator thudded to a halt. An emergency stop. The lights flickered. She turned to me. You think you're smart. You're just your mother's daughter. Weak. She stepped forward, jabbing a finger into my shoulder. You will drop this. I won't. She shoved me. Hard. I stumbled back, hitting the steel rail. My laptop bag flew from my hand, spilling its contents. This is your only warning, she hissed. The elevator chimed and the lights came back on. The doors opened. A security guard was standing there, his face pale. Problem, Ms. Hale? No, Marco, Sloane said, smoothing her jacket. Rowan just had a little accident. She tripped. Marco looked at me. On the floor. My papers scattered. He looked at her. He pressed a button on his radio. All clear. False alarm. She stepped out. I was left to gather my things. I thought it was just intimidation, but 2 hours later, as I was driving home, my phone vibrated with an anonymous text. No words, just a video file. I pulled over and played it. It was the security feed from inside the elevator, the entire encounter, the stop, the threat, the shove. The audio was crystal clear. People, too, and at the bottom, a second file. Marco's accident report. Ms. Hale R. reported dizziness and lost her balance. No injuries. System check clear. A complete fabrication. A cover-up. That was the moment I understood. The meeting at 9 a.m. wasn't about the photos. The photos were just the bait I was bringing. Sloane wanted me to show them. She wanted me to accuse her. She needed me to be loud, emotional, and public. She had lined up the board as witnesses. She had HR on standby to commit me. She had security prepared to lie for her. She wasn't going to deny the photos. She was going to use them as proof of my violent obsession. She needed an explosion. And just an hour ago, in that glass room, she got one. She'd lunged. She'd hit me. That clack of her bracelet on my bone. That wasn't a loss of control. That was a tactic. She was trying to get me to hit her back, to scream, to cry, to prove her unstable narrative correct. She needed a violent incident for the record. And when I just stood there, bleeding and silent, she whispered, "You just assaulted your CFO." She manufactured the incident she needed. The elevator chimed, opening to the lobby. I saw them. 2 new security guards, not from our usual detail, standing near the exit. They were watching me, waiting to escort me, waiting for me to make a scene. Sloane was thorough. She would want the USB drive. She would want to destroy the evidence she thought I had. I held the small black drive in my palm, the one I'd plugged into the laptop, the one with the photos. It was a copy. As I walked past the lobby's central fountain, I let my hand drop. My fingers uncurled. The small black drive slipped from my grasp, skittering across the marble floor with a faint clack, clack, clack. It slid to a stop near the leg of a leather sofa. I didn't break stride. I didn't look back. I heard one of the guards murmur into his radio as I pushed through the revolving door. She dropped it. By the fountain. Securing it now. Let them have it. Let them run back to Sloane, victorious, presenting her with the proof they'd recovered. Let them think they had won. Let them think they'd erased the evidence. I stepped out into the cold garage, the real USB drive, the one with the photos, the silver Wren financials, the elevator video, and the audio of Sloane's threat, was already downstairs. It was safe. It was tucked inside the hollowed-out handle of a ball-peen hammer, in my grandfather's old leather tool bag, sitting in the trunk of his 1985 Mercedes. The photos were just the bait. The slap was just the trigger. Phase 2 was about to begin. It wasn't about photos anymore. It was about the microphone. The ramp to B2 was a spiral into colder, denser air. The polished marble of the lobby gave way to raw, unpainted concrete, the floors stained with oil and winter salt. The air was heavy, a chemical fog of cold gasoline, damp cement, and old exhaust. My heels, which had clicked so sharply on the marble, now made a softer, more desperate thud, thud, thud in the swallowing silence. The pain in my cheek had subsided to a steady, rhythmic throb, a metronome for my anger. He was there, just as the text had promised. He wasn't waiting in the open. He was parked in stall G12, a forgotten corner by the humming electrical substation. His car was a 1985 Mercedes 300 SD. It was a tank, painted a deep, non-metallic black, a relic from an era before plastic bumpers and planned obsolescence. It was the car he'd driven me to my first day of school in. Harlan Ridge, my grandfather, was standing by the open trunk. He was 78, but he didn't look frail. He looked compressed, like all his energy had been pressurized into a denser form. He wore a dark wool overcoat, perfectly pressed, and leaned on his cane. The cane was his third leg, his trademark. It was made of black walnut, polished over decades of use to a sheen like piano glass. It was beautiful, but it wasn't an accessory. It was a tool. I stopped a few feet from him. He didn't turn right away. He was watching the entrance ramp in the car's side mirror. "You're bleeding," he said, his voice a low rumble that the concrete seemed to absorb. It wasn't an accusation. It was a data point. "Sloane." I saw. The feed was. He searched for the word. "Clear." The maintenance sign was a nice touch. They didn't think to check the node in the server room. They just unplugged the one in the hall. He turned to me. His eyes were the same gray as the Grayford sky, but they were not cold. They were focused. He gestured to the open trunk, to a scarred, heavy-duty laptop sitting next to a worn leather tool bag. "Did you lose them?" "I gave them a decoy," I said, my voice hoarse. "The one from the meeting. Security thinks they have it." "Good," he nodded. "Never let them think they've lost. Let them think they've won." He reached up and tapped the small, beige device tucked behind his right ear. "They called this a hearing aid when they pushed me out, said I couldn't follow the board's discussions." He smiled, a tight, grim expression. "It is, in a way. It just hears everything, and it records." I looked closer. It wasn't the soft, medical-grade plastic of a normal hearing aid. It was custom-molded, hard shell, with a pinprick microphone. "I'm old," he said, and the words were laced with a profound, engineered irony. "But I know how to change a battery." He winked. The gesture was so out of place, so jarring, that it almost made me laugh. It was a spark of light in the concrete tomb. He reached into his overcoat pocket and pulled out a small, black box, no bigger than a deck of cards. It was heavy, milled aluminum, with a single, rubberized button and a short, flexible antenna. "Local transmitter," he said. "Military spec, encrypted. It bypasses their standard IT security because it doesn't use their network." I took it. The metal was cold, solid. "What does it bypass to?" Harlan pointed up, at the ceiling, at a large, cone-shaped speaker bolted to a concrete beam, its grill covered in dust, the building's emergency public address system. "When I built this place," he said, "I designed the safety systems myself. Redundancy on redundancy, the fire and emergency PA runs on a dedicated, hardwired analog channel. It cannot be shut down from the network. It's for fires, floods, terrorists." "Or us," I whispered. "Or us." The text tested every Tuesday at 6 a.m. using a broadcast channel. The password for that channel hasn't been changed since 2003. It's Luminex 123. A plan. Cold, beautiful, and terrifyingly simple. Crystallized in my mind. "A safety drill," I said. "An emergency compliance review," he corrected, his eyes bright. "To gather the entire staff, all hands, in one room, the Aegis Auditorium." I reached into my pocket, my fingers closing around the real USB drive, the one I'd swapped in my car this morning, the one that had never been near the catalyst room. I pulled it out. The drive was warm from my body. "Everything is on here," I said. "The Silver Wren financials, the keycard logs, the video from the elevator last night." He took it from me. His fingers, though wrinkled, were steady. He didn't just plug it into the laptop. He opened a command line interface on the scarred old machine. The laptop was a dinosaur, a thick, heavy-duty model that looked like it had survived a war. It probably had. He ran a checksum. I watched the green text scroll. Verifying the file integrity. He was checking the data. Trust, but verify. Always. MD5. Hash, E4, F9. Success. "Good," he breathed. He slotted the drive into the port. He looked up at me, the laptop's green-tinted screen casting shadows across his face. "Sloan was right about one thing. You can't just shout. They're deaf to it." He tapped a key. "So, you let them hear themselves." He opened a file. Elevator threat audio. Wave. "We need to check the signal. The auditorium is on the 10th floor. The walls are thick." He hit the button on the black transmitter. He clicked play. For a second, there was only the hum of the garage. Then, from the speaker above our heads, Sloane's voice boomed, amplified, metallic, and monstrous. "Think you're smart. You're just your mother's daughter. Weak. You will drop this." The sound echoed, bouncing off the concrete walls. A disembodied, digital ghost. It was horrifying. It was perfect. Harlan clicked stop. The echo died. He looked at his cane, which he had propped against the bumper, on the silver collar, just below the walnut handle. A small, recessed light was blinking, a steady, pure green. "No interference," he said. "The signal is clean. The line is open." He picked up the cane, his grip tightening on the polished wood. "They think this is a walking stick. They think I'm a fossil. They think you're a hysterical girl. They have built their entire world on a foundation of underestimation." He handed the black transmitter back to me. "You're not going to do it?" I asked. "It's not my company anymore. Rowan, it's yours to save. Or to burn. I'm just the technician." He closed the trunk of the Mercedes. The sound was a heavy, final thunk. He started to walk toward the elevator bay, his cane tapping a slow, steady rhythm on the floor. I stood there, the transmitter heavy in my hand, the ghost of Sloane's voice still in my ears. The throb in my cheek was a reminder. Harlan stopped at the elevator door and looked back at me. The harsh fluorescent light caught the silver in his hair. "Control your breathing," he said. His voice was soft. but it cut through the cold air. When you walk in there, your heart will be a hammer. You must be the anvil. Be still. Be cold. Revenge isn't a knife. It's a mirror. All you have to do is hold it up. They will do the rest. He pressed the call button. The doors opened, and he was gone. I was alone again, in the cold, with the smell of gasoline. But now, I had the microphone, and I had the green light. The clock on the tech booth's monitor read 10:01:57. I had slipped in using Harlan's old master code, a ghost in the system. The room was dark, a small, glass-fronted box perched at the very back of the Aegis Auditorium, one floor above the main seating. I had a perfect, godlike view of the stage and the 500 seats below. My hand was on the black transmitter. My cheek throbbed. I was the anvil. At 10:02, I pressed the first key on my laptop, not the transmitter, a different program, a script that sent a single, authorized test signal to the fire control panel.
Whoop, whoop, whoop.
The emergency strobes flashed, bathing the 10th floor atrium in harsh, pulsing white light. The digital alarm, a synthesized, 3-note wail, blasted from every speaker. Attention, an emergency signal has been activated. This is a safety review. Please proceed calmly to your designated assembly point. This is a safety review. I watched the feeds from the atrium cameras. Confusion, panic, then annoyance. Hundreds of employees, analysts, marketers, accountants, began to rise from their desks, a slow, grumbling herd. They knew the drill. They moved in a river of gray suits and sensible heels toward the Aegis Auditorium, their primary assembly point. This was Harlan's genius. A fire drill locks all stairwell doors except for egress. But a safety review allows you to control the flow, and it keeps everyone in one place. 10 minutes later, the auditorium was full. The air was thick with the smell of damp wool coats and nervous chatter. The doors at the back of the theater hissed shut and locked with a heavy magnetic thud. On stage, CEO Victor Lane stepped up to the podium, a microphone in hand. He flashed his signature, reassuring smile. He was a man born in a boardroom, all expensive tailoring and cultivated charisma. Beside him, looking every bit the composed, powerful CFO, was Sloane. She was wearing a blood-red suit. She scanned the crowd, her face a mask of calm, maternal concern. She was performing. "Thank you. Everyone, thank you for your cooperation." Victor's voice boomed. "Just a routine safety test. We like to ensure our systems are robust and our people are responsive. Everything is perfectly fine. We'll have you back to your desks in just a few." I looked down, past the rows of heads, to the very last row, near the aisle. Harlan was sitting there, his wool coat folded on the seat beside him. His walnut cane was resting horizontally across his lap. He was just an old man, patiently waiting. Victor was still talking. "Our commitment to a safe and transparent workplace." Transparent. That was my cue. I kept my breathing steady. "Hold the mirror." I unmuted the transmitter. I hit play on the audio file. The feedback was instant, a high-pitched squeal that made Victor flinch. And then, Sloane's voice, not from the stage, but from everywhere, from the ceiling speakers, from the walls. A cold, clear, venomous whisper, amplified 1,000 times. "No one will believe you. You're unstable." The auditorium went dead silent. The collective inhalations sucked the air out of the room. 500 heads snapped from Victor, on stage, to the speakers, and then to each other. Victor froze. His smile locked in a grotesque rictus. Sloane's mask didn't just crack, it disintegrated. Her head whipped around, her eyes scanning the crowd. Furious, searching. She looked directly up at the tech booth. I sat back, in the shadows. "What is this?" she hissed into her own microphone, but I had cut the stage feed. Her voice was small, unheard. She made a frantic, cut-it motion to the side of the stage, where the house technicians should have been, but they were locked out. The crowd was already whispering, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Who said that? That was Ms. Hale, wasn't it? Before the whispers could build, I hit the next button. The massive 40-foot LED screen behind Victor and Sloane, which had been displaying the Luminex logo, flickered. It was replaced by the first photo. Hotel elevator. 2205. Victor's hand on Sloane's back. A wave of gasps rippled through the room. I clicked again. Hallway. Suite 4207. 2207. I clicked again. The embrace. The room was in chaos. People were standing up, pointing. "This is absurd," Victor roared, his voice finally breaking through. He grabbed the podium mic, and I let him have it. He needed to be heard. "This is a coordinated attack. This is slander. Those images they're fakes, deep fakes. This is a malicious digital assault." He was good. He was plausible. He was already building the narrative. Attack, malicious, fake. Sloane was right behind him, nodding. "This is libel. We will find who is responsible for this." I had the antidote ready. As Victor said the word, deepfake, I sent the next signal. The main screen split. On the left, the photos. On the right, a new image appeared. It was a screenshot of an email, an auto-forwarded, verified email from the Halberd Hotel's billing system, sent to a shell account I controlled. It was the folio for Suite 4207. The name on the reservation, Victor Lane. The charges, Presidential Suite, 1 night. Room service, 1x Dom Perignon, 08. Room service, 2x Filet Mignon. And the payment method, Corporate Amex, account ending, 8008. The Luminex corporate card, the one whose statements were personally approved by Sloane Hale. The room erupted. This is a violation," Victor stammered, his charisma evaporating, leaving only a pale, sweating man. "This is a material event." A new voice, sharp, clear, and commanding, in the third row. Catherine Voss, our chief compliance officer, stood up. She was a woman I'd always respected, a stickler for the rules, a true believer in the law. Her face was ashen. "This is evidence of financial impropriety and a breach of fiduciary duty. I am ordering an immediate halt on all executive and insider trading, pending a full investigation." That was Sloane's trigger, the money. She lunged for the podium microphone, shoving Victor aside. Her face was a mask of pure, distilled rage. The red suit was no longer powerful. It was a warning flare. "She's lying!" Sloane shrieked, her voice cracking with the feedback. "This is a fabrication. It's that ungrateful, unstable." She was about to say my name. She was about to use the file. She was about to tell them all I was crazy. I didn't let her finish. I hit play on the final file. The screen wiped clean. The photos, the email, all gone. Replaced by video. Silent. High resolution. Color video. The feed was unmistakable. It was the interior of the Catalyst glass room. From this morning. The angle was high. From the corner. The timestamp read 9/14/22. The video showed me. Standing by the table. It showed Sloane. Her face contorted. It showed her lunge. The auditorium went completely, utterly silent. They watched her arm swing. They watched the clack of her gold bracelet against my cheekbone. They watched my head snap to the side. They watched me raise a hand to my face. And they watched me, motionless, as Sloane composed herself, leaned in, and whispered. The audio was still off. It didn't matter. The act itself was so brutal, so undeniable, that a woman in the front row cried out. Sloane was frozen on stage, staring at her own image, her own violence, played back 40 feet high. She was a monster in a red suit. She attacked me, Sloane gasped, her mind scrambling, defaulting to her pre-planned lie. You didn't see. She threatened me. I was defending myself. She's obsessed. She's violent. I let her words hang in the air for a full 3 seconds. Then, I unmuted the video's audio track. Her voice, the one from the glass room, filled the air. the whisper she thought only I had heard. "Who will believe you? You're unstable. Everyone knows it. You just assaulted your CFO." The lie, the gaslight, the frame-up, broadcast to 500 employees. A man from the board stood up, his face white. "My God, get security. Get them up here." But the doors were locked. The magnetic thud had been the system's containment protocol. No one was getting in. No one was getting out. Victor Lane was slowly backing away from Sloane, as if she were radioactive. Sloane was hyperventilating, her eyes darting from the screen to the locked doors. She was trapped. I killed the feed. The screen went black. The only light was the standard house lighting. The only sound was the frantic, panicked whispering of the crowd. In the back row, Harlan Ridge moved, slowly, deliberately. He raised his walnut cane and tapped it. Once, on the concrete floor, a hard, final thud. I looked at the cane, on the silver collar. The small, recessed light had just switched on, a steady, pure green. I heard his voice, not from a speaker, but from the transmitter's private comm channel, a whisper in my ear. "The line is open. Rowan. Next test." I picked up my laptop. The financial data was next. The real crime? I left the tech booth. My job done. The show was just beginning. I walked out of the darkness of the tech booth, my laptop clutched in my left hand, the transmitter heavy in my right. I moved down the carpeted stairs of the main aisle, my gaze fixed on the stage. The auditorium was a churning sea of confusion. The video of the slap had shattered the corporate veneer, leaving 500 employees stunned, angry, and buzzing with a voltage that was half schadenfreude, half terror. They were whispering, pointing, looking from the blank screen to the two figures trapped on the stage. Sloane and Victor were standing there, marooned in the harsh glare of the stage lights. Victor looked ill, his face the color of old parchment. Sloane was a different creature. The composed mask was gone, replaced by a raw, feral panic. Her eyes were wide, scanning the crowd, looking for me, for an exit, for an ally. She found none. I ascended the short steps to the stage. The click, click, click of my heels on the hollow wooden platform was the only clear sound in the room. It sounded like a clock ticking. Victor flinched as I approached, taking an involuntary step back. Sloane, however, hissed, "Get off this stage. You're fired. Security." "They can't hear you." "Sloane," I said, my voice quiet. I didn't look at her. I walked directly to the podium, unplugged the house HDMI cable, and plugged it into my own laptop. "And besides," I added, my fingers flying across the trackpad, "you don't have the authority." The 40-foot LED screen lit up again. The chaos in the room subsided, replaced by a tense, focused silence. There were no more photos, no more videos of violence, just a diagram, a flowchart, rendered in cold, sterile, corporate-approved blues and grays. I leaned into the podium microphone. The green light was on. My voice was calm, clear, and amplified to fill every corner of the room. "The photos are disgusting. The assault," I touched my still throbbing cheek, "is a crime, but they are not the real crime. They are a distraction. They are the collateral damage. This is the crime." My finger tapped the trackpad. A red laser pointer, emanating from the projector, landed on the first box in the diagram. Luminex Capital, operating budget. "It starts here," I said. "With our money. The money you—" I gestured to the crowd. "Work to earn every day." I clicked. A line drew itself from the first box to a second. "Silver Wren, LLC. And it goes here, to a shell corporation registered in a P&O box in the Cayman Islands. Silver Wren, LLC has no website, no employees, and no purpose, except one, to be their private bank." A third box appeared, connected to the second. Bell Arden Bank. Private Fund 774. This is the destination. I looked out at the sea of faces. They were analysts, accountants, data scientists. They understood numbers. The affair was the motive for the cover-up, but the goal was simple theft. On April 12th, Victor Lane held an emergency press conference, announcing a strategic supply chain cutback. He cited issues that, as head of product analysis, I can tell you did not exist. A new chart appeared, a stock ticker, Lumix. Our stock fell 14% by midday. I clicked, a buy order. At 14:30, as the market panicked, Silver Wren LLC executed a purchase of 3 million shares of Luminex stock, using funds siphoned from our own operating budget. I clicked again. 1 week later, April 19th, Victor Lane announced a miraculous new partnership, and the stock rebounded 18%. Silver Wren sold its shares. A 1-week risk-free profit of $12.6 million. They didn't just steal from the company, they stole from every single one of you with a 401k. A low, angry groan rippled through the room. This wasn't about sex or violence anymore. This was about their pensions. But how? I continued. Did they hide the seed money? They couldn't just write a check to Silver Wren. The auditors would find it. I pulled up the Halberd Hotel invoice again. They started small. They disguised their personal expenses as corporate ones. This invoice for Suite 4207, it was paid by Silver Wren, which was then reimbursed by Luminex under a contract for executive health and wellness consulting. They were billing the company for the rooms they used to plan its systematic destruction. That's not true, Victor stammered. Those contracts were legitimate. Then let's look at the contracts, I said. I pulled up an email. From Sloan, hale@luminex.com. To redacted, finance controller. Subject, urgent, GL code allocation, Silver Wren. Wren. The crowd read it in real time. We need to blend the consulting fees from Silver Wren, distribute them across the 300-level marketing, 500-level R&D, and 700-level logistics budgets. Spread it thin. I need this finalized by EOD for the quarterly audit. She was directing her staff to cook the books, I stated, my voice flat. To blend the theft into the cost of doing business, to hide millions in plain sight, spread across dozens of general ledger codes. That email is a forgery, Sloan shrieked, finally finding her voice. This is insane. I never wrote that. You didn't? I asked. I clicked on the email file. The properties window opened. This is the file's metadata, I said. As the 40-foot screen displayed the digital fingerprint, the email was saved as an EML file on the finance server, linked to an Excel sheet detailing the new GL codes. That Excel file was created on May 3rd. At 2:14 a.m., I pulled up a second file, the system admin logs. User, S, Hale login, 02:11 a.m. May 3rd, log out, 02:48 a.m. May 3rd, machine ID, CFO primary desktop. It was you, Sloan, at your desk, in the middle of the night, personally manipulating the data. I looked at Victor. He had gone from pale to translucent. But they couldn't do it alone. They needed to control the environment. They needed to control security. I switched back to the Halberd Hotel data. The suite was in Victor's name, but he didn't use his own key card to access the 42nd floor. The executive elevator requires a special key. I highlighted the log. 2213. Access. Granted. Floor 42. Card ID. 004A. I ran that card ID against our own keycard database. It doesn't belong to Victor Lane. It belongs to Marco Diaz, our head of executive security. The auditorium was tomb silent. The same man who filed a false report about my accident in the elevator last night, the same man who, at 08:30 this morning, personally placed the Systems Under Maintenance sign on the Catalyst room camera, the man who was supposed to be protecting this company. He was blackmailing me, Victor yelled. A desperate, pathetic attempt. He forced me. It was extortion. Was it Victor? I clicked to the final slide. It was a bank transfer receipt. From Silver Wren, LLC, to Diaz Security Solutions, private account. Amount, $150,000. Memo, building services. Retainer. The entire executive security team was on the payroll, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. They weren't extorting you. They were your accomplices. They were paid, with stolen company money, to look the other way, to turn off the cameras, to let the foxes guard the henhouse. In the third row, Catherine Voss, the compliance officer, was on her feet. She had her phone pressed to her ear, her face a mask of cold fury. She held up her free hand, signaling for silence. I am on the phone with legal counsel at Belle Arden Bank. She listened, her eyes wide. She looked at me, then at Victor. Yes, I see. Fund 774. She lowered the phone. The bank has confirmed the transfers. The fund's assets match our stolen disbursements. As of 10 minutes ago, that account has been frozen. A wave of applause and relief swept the room. The money was caught. Victor Lane knew he was finished, but the ego of a CEO dies hard. He tugged at his collar, attempting a smile. It was a ghastly skeletal twitch. This is all just a misunderstanding, he panted. A simple systems error. An accounting. A systems error. We can fix this. The lie was hollow. It was the last, dying gasp of a man who had already suffocated. A new sound entered the room. Thud, thud, thud. The sound of a cane on the auditorium's wooden floor. Every head turned. Harlan Ridge was walking, slowly, down the center aisle. He ignored the whispers. He ignored the employees scrambling to get out of his way. He walked with a steady, relentless rhythm until he reached the foot of the stage. He looked up at the two of them. Victor, defeated. Sloane, trembling with a rage she couldn't unleash. Harlan didn't need a microphone. His voice, trained to command rooms like this for 50 years, was a quiet, powerful baritone that reached the back wall. The system worked perfectly. Victor, he planted his cane. It recorded your keycards. It logged your emails. It time-stamped your files. It flagged your transfers. He looked up at the pale, sweating CEO and the woman who had tried to destroy his family. The only systems error in this room is greed. Harlan's words settled over the auditorium like a layer of frost. The only systems error in this room is greed. Victor Lane simply crumpled. He didn't argue. He didn't defend. He backed away from the podium, his hands half raised, and physically sank into the chair behind him. A puppet with its strings cut. He was finished. But Sloane was not. She was made of something colder, harder. I watched her as she stood alone. Center stage. The shock had passed. The rage had cooled. What replaced it was something terrifying. Pure, distilled calculation. She was scanning the board members in the front row, reading their faces, looking for a crack. She was rebooting, switching strategies. The financial evidence was damning. A labyrinth of numbers she couldn't escape. The video of the slap was brutal, but subjective. She would retreat to the only ground she had ever held, my instability. She would reframe the entire event. She took a shaky breath, and when she spoke, her voice was no longer a shriek. It was trembling, saturated with a grotesque, manufactured victimhood. "He's right," she said, her voice breaking, addressing the board. "It is about greed." She raised a shaking hand and pointed, not at the screen, but at me. Her greed, for the one thing she could never have, her father's approval. The room, which had been buzzing, went quiet again, confused. "She is obsessed," Sloane cried, the tears now flowing, catching the stage lights. "She has been obsessed with me since the day since the day he put his trust in me. He gave me the responsibility for this company, for his legacy, and she couldn't bear it." She was painting a new picture. The jealous, spurned daughter, the family drama. It was brilliant. It was simple. It was the one lie she had been seeding for 2 years. "She has threatened me. She has stalked me. And this morning," she took another ragged breath, playing it to the back row. "This morning, before this meeting, she attacked me." The crowd murmured. This was new. This didn't fit the video. That video you saw, she stammered, pointing at the black screen. It was edited. It was taken out of context. You didn't see what happened before, in the hallway. You didn't see her threaten my life. You didn't see her. She fumbled with the cuff of her blood-red suit jacket. She shoved the sleeve up her forearm, holding her arm out for the board to see. A dark, sickening, purple and blue bruise bloomed just below her elbow. It was an ugly, visceral thing. "She did this!" Sloane shrieked. "She grabbed me! She tried to stop me from coming to this meeting. She is violent. She is unstable. I am terrified of her." The narrative shifted. Doubt. The one thing she needed. A few board members looked from her bruise to me, their expressions hardening. The slap was one thing, but this was premeditated. I stood motionless at the podium. I let the accusation hang in the air, let it poison the room. "An attack," I said, my voice cutting through her sobs. The microphone amplified my calm, turning it into a weapon. "That's a very serious allegation." "Sloane," I turned back to my laptop. The screen flickered to life. "It's so serious, in fact, that you reported it, didn't you?" A new document filled the 40-foot screen. It was a scanned PDF, an official Luminex HR internal complaint form. "This," I said, "is a formal complaint filed with Human Resources. It's titled, Formal Report of Harassment and Physical Intimidation. The complainant is Sloane Hale, the accused." My finger tapped the trackpad, and the laser pointer highlighted my name. "Is Rowan Hale." Sloane nodded, her eyes wide with false tears, dabbing at her cheek. I had to. I was scared. I had to protect myself." "You were scared," I repeated, my voice flat. "So scared that you filed this complaint." The laser pointer moved. It settled on the digital timestamp at the bottom of the form. Received. Yesterday. 16:52. Estant. A collective. Confused silence. I spelled it out for them. "You filed a formal complaint, documenting an assault," I said, my voice dropping. 16 hours before you claim it happened." Sloane's tears stopped. Her breath hitched. "You weren't documenting violence. Sloane, you were scheduling it. You were creating the paper trail for the attack you planned to commit. You knew you were going to hit me. You just needed a story to cover it." That's not true," she stammered, but the logic was undeniable. The lie was exposed. "As for the bruise," I said, my fingers already moving, "it's very real, but I didn't give it to you." The screen changed. The HR document vanished. New footage appeared. This wasn't the grainy, high-angle security feed. This was 4K, crisp, clear, and stable. The angle was low, from between a stack of chairs and a rolling cleaning cart. The timestamp read, 06:15 a.m. Today. The location. The small, empty conference room on the 38th floor. Sloane was in the frame, alone, dressed in the same red suit. She looked left. She looked right. The room was empty. She took a deep, steadying breath, and then, with a violent, focused grunt, she slammed her own forearm against the sharp, steel edge of a filing cabinet. A sound, a wet, sickening thwack, was picked up by the phone's microphone. A wave of horrified gasps swept the auditorium. The Sloane in the video squeezed her eyes shut, her face a mask of pain. She pulled back her arm, pushing up the sleeve to inspect the rapidly reddening skin. She nodded, as if satisfied. But the video wasn't over. She then walked to the center of the room. She practiced lunging, then stumbling backward, as if shoved. She practiced a yelp of pain. She practiced her fall. I let it play for a full 30 seconds. "A member of the janitorial staff," I explained to the silent room, "was preparing the room for a 7 a.m. breakfast meeting. They saw her come in. They were afraid, so they hid, and they recorded." I hit stop. The screen went black. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. The only sound in the entire auditorium was the low, steady, roaring hum of the HVAC system, a cold wind blowing through the wreckage. Sloane was staring at the black screen, her mouth open, her chest heaving. There were no more tears. There were no more strategies. She was empty. I looked at her, the woman who had taken my father, my inheritance, and tried to take my sanity. "You built a file for 2 years to prove I was unstable," I said, my voice quiet. But the microphone caught every word, every trace of ice. "You lied, you gaslit, you manipulated, you hit me on camera, you faked a police report, you gave yourself a bruise, you rehearsed a fake assault." I paused, letting the weight of her actions settle on her. "You didn't need me to ruin your career. Sloane, you did it all by yourself." I turned away from her, to the board members. They were pale, huddled, whispering frantically to their legal counsel, who was already on his phone, at the foot of the stage. Harlan hadn't moved. He was watching the board. I saw his thumb move on the handle of his cane. The small green light on the silver collar, which had been steady, blinked. Once, he was recording. Not the stage. He was recording them, documenting their response. "This meeting is not over," I announced, and my voice was no longer that of an analyst. It was the voice of the woman in charge. "This is no longer a safety review. This is an emergency session of the board and shareholders." I looked at Catherine Voss, the compliance officer. "Ms. Voss, you have your orders. Lock the trading. Alert the SEC." I looked at the board. "Mr. Lane and Ms. Hale have committed gross negligence, breach of fiduciary duty, embezzlement, conspiracy to defraud, and assault. Their authority is, as of this moment, nullified." I let that sink in. I require 2 things, immediately. 1. The immediate and total surrender of all financial access, all administrative privileges, and all security credentials from Mr. Lane and Ms. Hale. 2. A unanimous board vote to open an independent forensic audit to be led by an outside firm of my choosing. This snapped Sloane out of her shock. The last vestiges of her power were being stripped. "You?" she hissed, the sound barely human. It was a raw, guttural shriek of pure hatred. "You don't have the right. You are a junior analyst. You have no standing. You have no power here. You have no authority." She's right. One of the board members, Davies, stammered, looking at his lawyer. "Ms. Hale, this is highly irregular. We have procedures." "Irregular. Mr. Davies?" Harlan's voice, from the floor. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a razor. "It is, in fact, precisely regular." He looked up at the board, his eyes sweeping over them, cold and appraising. "You all seem to have forgotten the company bylaws, the ones you agreed to when you accepted your seats, the ones I wrote." He tapped his cane. Thud. "Perhaps you should read Article 12. He paused, letting the name sink in. "The Founder's Clause." Sloane looked from me, on the stage, to Harlan, on the floor. Her face went white. She finally understood. I was the weapon. He was the one pulling the trigger. Harlan smiled. It was a cold, thin, devastating expression. "Oh, yes, she has the right." Harlan's words hit the room with the force of a physical blow. Article 12. The Founder's Clause. A panicked, rustling sound went through the front rows. Board members fumbled for their phones, their tablets, desperate to access the company's foundational documents. Davies, the board member who had challenged me, looked at his lawyer, his face pale. Is that real?" The lawyer, a sharp man in an impeccably tailored suit, was already scrolling through a document on his laptop. He looked up, his face grim. "It's real. Mr. Davies, Article 12, Section 4A. Founder's prerogative in case of moral hazard." "Moral hazard," Harlan repeated, his voice resonating with the weight of the words he had penned decades ago. A phrase I included for a day I prayed would never come. It defines a situation wherein the company's highest officers, namely the CEO or CFO, engage in actions that constitute a severe conflict of interest, gross negligence, or criminal malfeasance, thereby threatening the fundamental stability and reputation of the firm. He let his gaze rest on Victor, who was now visibly shaking, and then on Sloane, who was frozen in place, her face a mask of disbelief. In such an event, Harlan continued, Article 12 grants two immediate non-negotiable emergency powers. First, the right to unilaterally convene a special session of the board. Second, the right to assume temporary control of the founder's entire voting proxy. A wave of stunned calculations washed over the board. Harlan's proxy, the founder's shares. It wasn't the largest single stake. He'd diversified long ago. But it was, by far, the most powerful. It was the super voting bloc, the tiebreaker, the kingmaker. But, Harlan, you're not on the board, Davies stammered. You ceded your proxy when you retired. I did, Harlan agreed, his voice smooth. I ceded active control. He reached into the inner pocket of his wool overcoat. He didn't pull out a phone. He pulled out a long, cream-colored envelope. It was thick vellum, sealed on the back with a dark blue wax. But the bylaws, Mr. Davies, the bylaws you all seem so eager to forget, are a contract, and they provide for succession. He held up the envelope. This was prepared by the firm's original legal counsel, Eamon Walsh, God rest his soul. It has been sitting in his firm's vault for 10 years, to be opened only upon the legal triggering of Article 12, or my death. I'm pleased it's the former. All eyes were on the envelope. It was a piece of corporate antiquity, a buried will. The article states that the founder's prerogative and the proxy it controls passes to a designated heir, not an officer, an heir, someone with blood in the game, not just a paycheck. Sloane finally understood. Her face, which had been white, flushed a dark, mottled red. Her, she whispered. You're giving it to her. She pointed a shaking finger at me. This is a coup. This is nepotism. It's a contingency, Harlan corrected, his voice like ice. One you just activated. With a steady thumb, he broke the blue wax seal. The small crackle was the loudest sound in the room. He unfolded the single, heavy sheet of paper. He didn't read it to himself. He read it to them. I, Harlan T. Ridge, being of sound mind, do hereby designate the full and complete authority of the founder's prerogative, as defined in Article 12, to my sole heir and granddaughter. He looked up from the page, his eyes finding mine on the stage. Rowan Hale. I held my breath. The power, the responsibility. It was a physical weight descending on me. But, the board's lawyer interrupted, his voice sharp. The clause requires a trigger. It must be formally invoked. You can't just decide it's a moral hazard. There is a protocol. It has to be recorded, noted, filed with the board secretary. You are absolutely correct, Harlan said. He set the letter down on the edge of the stage. He held up his cane. A beautiful piece of work, isn't it? Black walnut. My father carved it. But I made some improvements. He twisted the silver collar beneath the handle. A small click. He slid the handle up, revealing not a blade, but a small, recessed digital recorder. As I said, he tapped his hearing aid. I like to record things. When I was retired, I was concerned about my cognitive decline, so I began to keep a meticulous audio journal to ensure I never forgot. He looked at the board's lawyer. Article 12 states the prerogative becomes effective the moment I, as founder, personally record my belief that a moral hazard exists. I don't have to file it. I don't have to tell a soul. I just have to state it. To make the finding, he held up the recorder. 3 nights ago, at 11:32 p.m., an anonymous source sent me a video file. His eyes met mine. The elevator. It was a recording of the CEO and CFO of my company conspiring to cover up a criminal act. It was concerning, he pressed a button, his own voice, low and clear, filled the auditorium, coming from the tiny speaker. 11:32 p.m. I have just reviewed footage of Sloan Hale and Victor Lane. It is my finding, as founder, that a state of moral hazard now exists within Luminex Capital. I hereby invoke Article 12. The proxy is active. God help us. He clicked it off. He looked at the board. The recording was made 3 days ago, which means he looked at me. Rowan has been in possession of the founder's voting proxy for the last 72 hours. The air was sucked from the room. I hadn't just been an analyst with evidence. I had been the single most powerful voting member in the room. I just hadn't known it until this second. Victor Lane's face went from pale to a ghastly, greenish white. He understood. This wasn't just a firing. This was an exorcism. "We need to leave," he choked, scrambling to his feet. This is not a legal meeting. This is a hostage situation. The doors are locked. We need to adjourn. The doors are locked as part of the safety review protocol. Mr. Lane. Catherine Voss, the compliance officer, stated. Her voice was pure steel. She was on my side. She was on the side of the rules. A protocol you signed off on last quarter. No one leaves a containment area until an all clear is given. The board's lawyer nodded, adjusting his tie. He knew which way the wind was blowing. He was adapting to the new reality. And, as per Article 12, Section 5, the invocation of the Founder's Clause automatically constitutes a legal special session of the board. This meeting is not only legal, Mr. Lane, it is now in session. All votes are binding. He looked up at me. Ms. Hale, the floor is yours. I took a deep breath. Be the anvil. Thank you, I said. I looked past Sloan, past Victor, to the board members. I, Rowan Hale, as acting proxy holder for the Founders Block, present the following resolution to the board for an immediate vote. I didn't need my notes. The words were burned into my memory. 1. The immediate and indefinite suspension, without pay, of CEO Victor Lane and interim CFO Sloan Hale, pending the results of a federal criminal investigation. 2. The immediate authorization of a full, independent forensic audit to be conducted by the firm of Deloitte, who are on standby. 3. The appointment of Mr. Arman Gupta, our current financial controller, as acting chief financial officer, effective immediately, to stabilize our accounts. 4. The immediate termination of all contracts with Silver Wren LLC and Diaz Security Solutions, and the immediate reinstatement of the previous independent security detail from the Allied building, who are waiting in the lobby. A new sound. Click, 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 click. It was the sound of the board members. They were clicking their expensive pens, getting ready to vote. We will vote on all 4 points as a single resolution, I stated. All in favor? Catherine Voss. I, Davies, the man who had challenged me, looking at Harlan's evidence. I, the 3rd board member. I, the 4th. I, the 5th. I, the 6th. I looked at Sloan. She was the 7th voting member of the board, by proxy for my father. She just stared at me, her chest rising and falling, her eyes burning with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. She said nothing. The resolution passes, I said into the silence. 6 in favor, 1 abstention. The board members began signing the papers their lawyers were frantically sliding in front of them. The scratch and click of pens on paper was the only sound. At that exact moment, the heavy magnetic locks on the auditorium doors buzzed and released with a loud thud. The doors swung open, but it wasn't Marco and his compromised team. It was 2 men and 1 woman in crisp, dark blue uniforms, Allied Security, the new team, the clean team. They walked down the aisle, their footsteps measured, professional. They didn't look at the crowd. They walked directly to the stage. One of them approached Victor Lane, who was still slumped in his chair. Mr. Lane, we'll need your building access card and all company-issued devices. Please come with us. Victor didn't resist. He handed over his badge. He was a ghost. The other two approached Sloane. She was rigid, a statue of rage. "Ms. Hale, your access card." Sloane didn't move. She just stared at me. "Ms. Hale," the guard repeated, his voice harder, slowly. Sloane unclipped the badge from her red jacket. She didn't hand it to him. She let it drop to the floor. Clack. The guard bent, picked it up, and motioned for her to walk. She started to move, a prisoner being escorted from her own throne. As she passed me, she stopped. She was so close I could smell the faint, acidic tang of her sweat under her expensive perfume. She leaned in, and her lips curled back from her teeth. "You are," she whispered, her voice a ragged saw, "the craziest bitch I have ever met." I didn't flinch. I just looked at her. "No, Sloane," I said, my voice just as quiet. "I'm just the first person who ever wrote you down." She was led away, off the stage and up the aisle, a silent, furious procession. The employees parted to let them pass, a sea of silent, staring faces. The doors closed. It was over. The tension in the room broke. People started to talk, to stand, to pull out their phones. I stood at the podium, my hands shaking, the adrenaline finally beginning to ebb, leaving a cold, vast emptiness. I felt a presence beside me. Harlan had climbed the steps to the stage. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the crowd, at the company he had built. He sat down on the edge of the stage, breathing heavily, and propped his cane beside him. He was quiet for a long moment. "Well," he said, adjusting his coat. "That was a productive meeting." I managed a small, shaky laugh. I sat down next to him. "She called me crazy," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Harlan looked at me. His eyes were soft, the tactical ice gone, replaced by a deep, weary pride. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Rowan," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Let me tell you the last secret. When they start calling you crazy, it's only because they're finally, absolutely, terrified of you. It's the sound of them losing. Never forget it." The vote was done. The air in the auditorium was thick, a toxic fog of shock, adrenaline, and the mundane shuffling of lawyers' papers. The board members were at a temporary table, signing the resolutions that would sever Sloane and Victor from the company. The new security team, Allied, stood by the stage steps, a silent, professional promise that the old guard was gone. Victor was gone, a hollowed-out man slumped in a chair, his eyes fixed on nothing. But Sloane was still standing. She was detained, but she was not defeated. She was watching the board sign, her eyes burning, her mind clearly spinning, searching for one last move. My phone, sitting on the podium, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Not over. Check the tech booth. She has a failsafe. Codename, Nightingale." A cold spike of adrenaline shot through me. Harlan, who was standing at the foot of the stage, caught my expression. I looked up at the glass-fronted booth at the back of the auditorium, the place I had just been. "They're signing," Harlan said, his voice low. "I know," I murmured, "but she's not done. Don't let her leave. Or, don't let her tablet leave her hands." I didn't run. I walked. I moved up the center aisle, against the current of stunned employees who were beginning to file out. I pushed through the door to the tech booth. The room was dark, save for the blue and green status lights of the broadcast equipment. It smelled of hot plastic, dust, and the faint metallic tang of ozone, and I was not alone. Anna Kwan, our head of communications, was huddled on a stool in the far corner. Her face buried in her hands. She was my friend. We had worked on 3 product launches together. I had been to her son's birthday party. She looked up. Her face was a wreck, streaked with mascara and sheer, abject terror. "Rowan," she whispered. "The fail-safe. Anna," I said. My voice was cold. I had no room for anything else. "Nightingale, show me." I can't." "Show me. Now." My laptop was still there, open, plugged into the main system. I hadn't had time to shut it down. She made me, Anna sobbed, her whole body shaking. Last night, she knew this. She knew this was a possibility. I looked at my own screen. I didn't need her. I had admin access. I opened the broadcast queue, and there it was. A single, timed script. Nightingale execute, bat. It wasn't a manual play. It was a network-triggered file. Set to execute the moment Sloane's personal tablet sent a specific, encrypted signal, a dead man's switch. The script would override all other inputs. It would seize the 40-foot screen and every speaker in the building. What is it, Anna? A confession, she whispered. The words choked. It's you, Rowan. Your voice. I found the source file. Confession our hail final. Wave. A deepfake. My mind raced. The file metadata. I clicked. Author. A. Kwan. Y. The word came out flat. Dead. My son, she cried, the word tearing from her. His medical bills, the experimental treatment for his leukemia. The insurance wouldn't cover it. They said it was investigational. It was $500,000. Sloane found out. She paid it. She just paid it. She said it was a gift. And then, last night, she called it a debt. She said she owned me. That if I didn't do this, she'd report it as a bribe, have me fired, and sue me for the money. My son would be kicked from the program. She was destroyed. Another victim. Just a different kind. My hand went to my phone. I could record this. Another piece of evidence. I looked at her. A mother who had made an impossible choice. The rage I felt was not for her. It was for Sloane. For weaponizing a child's life. I put the phone back in my pocket. The company will cover your son's treatment, I said. The words were quiet, but absolute. All of it. We will write it into our policy. It will not be a debt. It will not be a gift. It will just be covered. Anna stared at me, her eyes wide, uncomprehending. I need 2 things, I said. First, delete it, all of it, from the server. Now. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely type. Yes, okay. She entered her password. She highlighted the script, the audio file, the source directory. Her fingers hovered over the key. Drag, drop, empty recycle bin. The files were gone. Second, I said, you're going to walk down to that stage with me. You're going to stand by the lawyers, and you are going to be a protected witness. You will tell them everything. She nodded, wiping her face, a small, fragile core of resolve returning. Yes, okay, yes. We walked back into the auditorium. Tro lai kan feng, as the old playbooks would say. Returning to the scene, the mood had shifted. The board had signed the papers. The security guards were moving, flanking Sloane and Victor. This was the end. Sloane saw me. Then she saw Anna Kwan walking beside me, and in that moment, Sloane's face, a mask of defiant, icy rage, crumbled. It was a flicker. So fast I almost missed it. The realization that her last, desperate, nuclear option was gone, but she was a cornered animal. She had to try. You think you've won? She screamed, her voice echoing in the half-empty room. She was looking at me, her eyes wild. She held up her personal tablet. You crazy, delusional girl. You forgot the one thing that matters. The truth. Your truth. She jabbed her thumb onto the tablet's screen. The Nightingale trigger. You wanted evidence? She shrieked at the board. You wanted a confession? Here it is. Here is Rowan Hale, in her own words, confessing to faking everything. She tapped the screen again, frantically. Play, damn you. The 40-foot screen behind her flickered. It went from the Luminex logo to nothing, a black, empty void. What? No. Sloane's face was a picture of dawning, cognitive horror. She hammered the screen with her thumb. It's there. Play it. Play the confession. It's gone. Sloan, I said. My voice, from the podium microphone, was the only sound. Sloan spun around, her eyes landing on Anna, who was standing beside the board's lawyers. Anna, Sloan whispered, the name a curse. You? She deleted it, I said. The deepfake? The fake confession? The one you blackmailed her into making? It was the final cut. The last thread of her power. Severed. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just deflated. All the venom, all the fire, rushed out of her, leaving a hollow, shaking shell. The security guards took her arms. This time, she didn't resist. I turned back to my laptop. But, I said, and the board members paused, their pens freezing. She did remind me. There is one last file, not a deepfake, not a video, just a conversation. The one that started this all, the one that proves the intent. This was Harlan's recording, the one from his hearing aid 3 weeks ago, in a closed-door strategy session, the one he'd given me on the drive. I hit play. The file was crystal clear. The audio engineering was perfect. Victor Lane's voice, smooth, confident, and utterly corrupt, filled the room. So we'll announce the cutbacks on the 12th. The street will panic. The stock will dip. 10, 15%. We'll buy the float through the silver wren shell. The board doesn't need to know. It's just strategic repositioning. We'll ride it all the way back up when we announce the new contracts. Simple, clean, and no one gets hurt. A board member made a small, sick sound. This was the smoking gun. Not a chart, not a graph, a confession, the calm, premeditated plan to commit securities fraud. In his own voice, it was over, for real. I hit stop. The silence that returned was final. At the foot of the stage, Harlan Ridge nodded, a slow, profound gesture of completion. He reached down and tapped his black walnut cane. Once, on the wooden floor, a single, hard, final thud. I looked at the silver collar, the small green light, which had been glowing steadily, blinked once, twice, and went dark. The recording was stopped. The mirror had done its work. It's time, Harlan murmured, mostly to himself. It's time to clean the house. The audio file of Victor's voice, calm and clear as he plotted the company's plunder, echoed in the vast auditorium and then clicked into silence. It was the sound of a vault door closing. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, the sound of an ending. The board's lawyer, Prendergast, who had looked progressively grayer with every new slide, finally stood. He was the voice of procedure, the man who would translate this corporate violence back into the sterile language of the law. He adjusted his silk tie, a small, normalizing gesture, as if straightening the world back onto its axis. He addressed the remaining board members, his voice a dry monotone, devoid of shock. The special session has voted. The resolutions are binding and effective immediately. The suspensions of Mr. Lane and Ms. Hale are indefinite, pending federal investigation. He looked at Catherine Voss, the compliance officer. Ms. Voss, you will coordinate with my office. We are to turn over this entire data set. Ms. Hale's analysis, the Silver Wren financials, and Mr. Ridge's audio recordings to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the District Attorney's Office by close of business today. He turned, his gaze sweeping over the few stunned employees who remained. A full, independent forensic audit, to be led by Deloitte, will commence. Now, this meeting is, effectively, the beginning of that audit. You may return to your desks. You will be briefed by your managers. The Allied security guards, who had been waiting by the stage steps with a quiet, professional patience, moved forward. They were not aggressive. They were inevitable. One guard, a tall woman with her hair in a tight bun, walked to Victor Lane. He was still slumped in his chair, a hollowed-out man, his charisma and power drained, leaving only a loose-fitting, expensive suit. Mr. Lane, we'll need your building access card and all company-issued devices. Please come with us. He rose like a man in a trance, his hands held limply at his sides. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Harlan. He just handed over his badge and allowed himself to be guided up the aisle, a ghost leaving his own haunting. The other two guards flanked Sloane. She was rigid. The adrenaline was gone, the scheming over, the last failsafe defeated. All that was left was a brittle, cold, monumental rage. She was a statue of her own ruin, magnificent in her blood-red suit. "Ms. Hale, it's time to go." She didn't move. She was staring at me. Her eyes were burning with a hatred so pure, so elemental, it was almost a physical force. "Ms. Hale," the guard repeated, his voice firmer, but not unkind. He gestured. She took a single, slow step, then another. She walked with the deliberate, agonizing dignity of a queen being led to the scaffold. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. As she passed the podium where I stood, she stopped. She was 5 feet away. She turned, her entire body rigid, her mouth opened. I saw the words form on her lips, the words that had been her first weapon and her last defense, the words that had almost worked. "You? Crazy." She spat the syllables, but no sound came out. I had cut the podium microphone. The house audio system was dark. Her last, venomous curse was swallowed by the air. A silent movie of her own final, impotent gesture. One of the guards gently, firmly, took her arm. She jerked it away, a reflex. But she moved. She walked, head high, up the center aisle. The employees parted for her, a sea of silent, staring faces. The doors at the back of the auditorium hissed shut behind her, and she was gone. The moment the doors closed, the strength that had held me upright, that had turned my nerves into high-tensile steel, dissolved. A profound, shaking void opened up. My whole body felt like one single, throbbing bruise, my cheek, where her bracelet had struck me hours or a lifetime ago, burned with a deep, percussive ache. I stepped down from the stage, my laptop clutched in my hand. Harlan was waiting for me at the bottom, by the front row. He didn't move to hug me. He didn't smile. He just stood there, his presence a solid, grounding force. He looked at my cheek, at the purple-black mark that had been the entry wound for this entire war. "It's over," I said. My voice was a rasp. He nodded. Once, a short, sharp gesture of profound acknowledgement. "You did well," he said, his voice low. "You didn't shout. You didn't weep." He tapped his own temple. "You spoke with data. It is the only language they truly understand. It's the only one they cannot refute." I looked past him, not at the stunned faces of the remaining lawyers, but up, through the auditorium, toward the 46th floor. I could just see the corner of the catalyst room, the glass box where I had bled. I knew the stain was still there, that diagonal streak of my own blood, my signature. Later, I would go up there alone. I would take an antiseptic wipe from the janitor's cart, and I would wipe that glass clean, a contract, voided. "Ms. Hale?" Prendergast, the lawyer, was at my elbow. With him was Arman Gupta, the mild-mannered financial controller I had nominated. Arman looked terrified, humbled, and fiercely determined, all at once. "The board has ratified your emergency appointments," Prendergast said. "The auditors are in the lobby, but these—" He held out a thin sheaf of papers on a clipboard. "These require your immediate signature as acting proxy holder. Emergency directives." I took the pen. I didn't sit. I signed them standing up, using the armrest of a front-row seat as my desk. Directive 001, Authorization of Forensic Audit, Deloitte. I signed. Directive 002, Nullification of Contracts. A short list, Silver Wren LLC, Diaz Security Solutions. I signed. My pen stroke a sharp, clean line, cutting them off. Directive 003, Reinstatement of Employee Benefits. This was the one I had added. Sloan had cut the 401k match and hiked healthcare premiums to fund her shell company. My signature reversed it, effective immediately. I heard a small, sharp gasp of relief from a cluster of HR employees who were watching from the aisle. "There's one more thing," I said. I opened my laptop on the podium. The board, the lawyers, they all watched. I logged into my terminal. I opened a new email draft. The address, Luminex, all employees. The subject, Truth and Restoration. The body was short. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a victory lap. It was a statement of fact, a promise. To all staff, today was difficult. It was the necessary, painful removal of a deep-seated corruption. The parties responsible have been removed. Their actions do not represent this company, its values, or the work you do. A full forensic audit is underway. We will be transparent. We will be thorough. And we will be fair. We will recover what was stolen. We will protect what is ours. Safety begins with truth. We start now. I stared at the words. My hand was on the trackpad, the cursor hovering over the send button. This was the final act, the last word. My hand was not shaking. I clicked it. Once. "Ms. Hale?" A new voice. A woman I didn't recognize. Standing in the aisle. She wore a simple, professional suit and held a reinforced, lockable briefcase. "I'm Maria Sanchez, from Deloitte. I'm leading the audit." I closed my laptop. The email was gone, flying through the digital arteries of the building. A signal that the fever had broken. I looked at this woman, Sanchez. She was my age. Her eyes sharp, clear, and utterly impartial. She was the future. She was the cleanup crew. "This," I said, "is for you." I pulled the USB drive from my pocket, the real one, the one that had lived in Harlan's tool bag, the drive that held everything, the photos, the financials, the videos, the audio confessions, the entire, brutal, meticulous case. She didn't smile. She simply took it, a clean handoff, and slipped it into a sealed, static-proof evidence bag. "Thank you," she said. "We'll take it from here." The main auditorium doors were open. The chaos had subsided. The employees were gone, filtering back to their desks, energized, terrified, and buzzing with the story of a lifetime. The lawyers were packing their briefcases. Through the open doors, the light from the 10th floor atrium streamed in. It was past noon. The harsh fluorescent bulbs of the auditorium were pale and weak against the bright, clean, uncompromising light of the sun. It cut a sharp rectangle onto the carpet, bright and clear as a freshly balanced sheet. I walked toward it. Harlan fell into step beside me. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The work was done. No one applauded. No one cheered. It wasn't a victory. It was a cleaning, a necessary, painful, and long overdue exorcism. I stepped over the threshold, out of the darkness of the theater and into the light. I didn't look back. Back in the auditorium, the stage was empty. The 40-foot screen was dark. The lawyers were gone. The only things left were the echoes and a single, discarded clipboard. In the corner, by the front row where an old man had sat and watched the empire he built teeter and reset, a black walnut cane leaned against the wall. Its polish gleamed faintly in the ambient light. On its silver collar, the small, recessed green light was dark. The line was closed. The recording was finished. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We'd love to know where you're listening from. So drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Please be sure to subscribe, like the video, and if you want to support this story, hit the hype button to help it be heard by more people.